I recently had the chance to sit down with meteorologist Greg Fishel, who became a household name in the Raleigh, North Carolina area during his time at WRAL. He was also a big reason I pursued a career in meteorology. Greg spent 40 years as a broadcast meteorologist, serving as chief meteorologist at WRAL for 3 decades. During that time, he experienced tornado outbreaks, the biggest snowstorm in North Carolina's history, and countless tropical systems. For his efforts, Greg was inducted into the NC Broadcasters Hall of Fame in 2017. In this episode, we explore how Greg made an impact on the people of North Carolina through his weather forecasts each day, how broadcast meteorology has changed since his first job in 1979, and Greg's evolving view towards climate change. We also discuss the process behind Fishel's role in creating 600 questions for a test to help certify broadcast meteorologists. It's a discussion you'll likely want to watch more than once. So let's begin. So thank you again for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to
Sure.
start off taking you back to the early 2000s when I was like 6 or 7 years old.
Okay.
You probably remember at WREL, you used to go out to the NC State Fair for like the meet and greets and all that in the tents. So I was about, like I said, 6 or 7, and I was a big weather fan, obviously still am being a meteorologist.
Right.
And I went out with my family, and you were there. So I had to get in line to come meet you. But what happened was they cut the line off just
Oh
in front of
no.
me to meet you. And I started crying, not like little
Oh,
tears, but like bawling my eyes out.
oh
The
no.
question I have from that is, were you aware of the impact you were making and what you meant to people during your time at WREL?
Probably no idea. In fact, I was thinking about this morning that being on television is probably a lot like being a school teacher, that you don't honestly know the impact that you may or may not be having on the people that you are in contact with. I know it probably means the world to a teacher after 20 years if somebody comes back and tells them you changed my life. You know, you gave me direction on what I wanted to do. And I will tell you one thing that's changed for me over the years is that nobody believes this, but I was the biggest introverted nerd you would ever meet growing up. And when I first got into the TV business, I didn't want to be recognized. When I went out to a public place, I would stare at the floor and pray that nobody would say anything to me. And one day I just decided, when I walk into the grocery store the next time, if I make eye contact with somebody, I'm gonna say hi to them. And that day literally changed my life as it relates to television. And I went from going to a Rotary Club to speak and thinking, oh my God, what if they hate me, to, oh, I get to make 50 new friends today.
Yeah, that's a good way to look
So
at it.
it requires a lot less energy to just be friendly and open than it does to try to avoid it.
Yeah, that's the way it is down here too. When I first started here, I was doing the weekends.
Okay.
Then I moved to like a swing shift, 11 to 8 each weekday. And now in the morning show, which is a lot of getting up early and tired all the
Mm.
time. But at first, I started off like I didn't really want to be like not bothered, but just
Right.
wanted to go in the store, do my thing, get out, not necessarily pulled aside. But now I've come to love it. You get to meet people and interact with the people that watch you each day.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. And you probably have realized that earlier than I did. So kudos to you for figuring that out quickly.
And I'm sure you got recognized a lot more too once you became chief at WREL. Now, I know I read somewhere that you didn't want to necessarily be the chief when they first offered it to you. So, did you come to love it, and why did you initially kind of hesitate to that role?
It was much the same thing where I told the general manager, I said, if I'm having trouble with the recognition factor as the number two person, it's only going to get exponentially worse, being the number one person. And he said, well, will you help us look for a successor? And I said, sure. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, what if this is one of those things where the good Lord is putting an opportunity in my lap and I'm going to look back 20 years from now and wonder what if? And so I went back to him and I said, can we try this? And after a year, if you don't like me, you can fire me. And if I don't like it, I can leave. And that was really about the time that I started to embrace the what we just talked about, the don't be scared of people, welcome them, invite them, and then things just got better from there. So, but I'm awfully glad that they didn't move quickly, because if they had, my entire life may have turned out differently.
Yeah. And I know you became a staple in Raleigh, likely from being at WRAL, obviously. Was there ever a point where you thought about going back to your home state of Pennsylvania, or were you happy being in North Carolina's capital?
I love North Carolina. And I think specifically where I was, I mean, you think about this, the TV station was right across the street from the meteorology building at NC State. And the National Weather Service forecast office moved from the airport to Centennial Campus, which was right behind me the other direction. Uh, and I like being in progressive areas. And when I say progressive, I mean where learning is going on, that there's research, there's knowledge acquisition. And I have no problem hanging around people that are smarter than I am. Okay. I mean, I learn from them. That makes me better. And I used to tell the professors at State, and I said, look, if you ever hear me say anything on the air that is not scientifically accurate, don't sit around the water cooler and discuss it amongst yourselves. Call me, because I think in a sense, you and I are the liaison between the scientific community and the public. And the last thing in the world, either you or I want to do, is say something that's not scientifically accurate. And that's a big responsibility. But as long as you take it seriously and you've got the resources available to you, then it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and you talking about being scientifically accurate, obviously, that's always the goal. You were one of the reasons behind the formation of the newer certification for the AMS testing process. How did
Mhm.
that come to be, and why was it important to you to make sure that became something that every meteorologist aspired to get?
Well, it was funny. John McLaughlin, who was a staple at KCCI in Des Moines, Iowa for years, uh, he asked me to be on the board of broadcast meteorology with the AMS. And I said, I'd love to. Well, it wasn't more than 3 or 4 weeks after I got on the board, he said, how would you like to chair the committee to develop the certification exam? And I said, okay. But I will tell you that I had about 10 people that were on a committee that helped me enormously. This was not a one-man band at all. And we actually, three of us went out to Boulder to the COMET program, the education, the med ed thing, meteorology education, and talked with them. And we came up with 600 questions, a 600 question pool. And the reason I thought that was important was that up until that point, if you got your AMS seal, all you had to do was submit 3 tapes on successive days that made it look like you knew what you were doing. And I just felt like all these other programs that have certification exams, you've got to prove you actually know the stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's why I pushed for that. Um, and I don't know. I know some people that told me that were my age, it's like, it's not going to get me any more money. I'm not going to bother with it. Um, but I guess it's just one of those things where, we all want to make sure that everybody in our profession is being held to a certain standard, just like any other profession would. And I haven't really gotten a lot of feedback in recent years as to whether or not it's succeeded or hasn't succeeded, but a lot of people have it. So I'm assuming that it must be important to somebody.
Yeah.
Uh, but that was a fun process though of going through all that and really learning how to be, in a sense, an educator. Like, how do I word this question so that the person is clear on what we're asking, and I found that to be challenging at times. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people that I know that have it, obviously you have to study for months and months to, make sure you remember everything you learned initially.
Right.
I feel like one of the things about the SEAL too is even though the public might not recognize what it means, they might see it and still think, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. Obviously, they're not just a personality on TV.
Right.
They actually know the science behind it too.
Yes. And I was extremely lucky, and I'm sure I think we all have moments in our life where we look back on it and we think that maybe there was a higher power behind it, you know. But 1979, when I graduated from Penn State, that was just about the time the TV stations were starting to hire degreed meteorologists as opposed to announcers or personalities. You know, I could not have timed that better if I was in charge of the decision. And you know there were so many things that happened back then that if any domino would not have fallen the way it did, my life would have ended up completely different. So I just consider myself blessed to the nth degree when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and talking about the timing on that being perfect, obviously things have changed a lot since then as far as broadcast meteorology, news in general. How do you think things are going to change in the years to come with meteorology on TV as far as is it going to become more digital? Is it going to become more streaming? What's your thoughts on that?
My gut tells me that the television industry in terms of people watching at a certain time is going to decline because now you have the option of watching stuff whenever you want to watch it, you know. Um, and that, there's a certain amount of sadness that comes to me when I think about that. Um, the one thing that does bother me though, well, two things. Is AI going to put us all out of business at some point? I don't know. I hope not. I mean, I hope there's always going to be a human element. But the other thing, though, is that when I see some of these YouTube videos and Facebook posts and so forth, and the headlines always make it look like we're all going to die,
Yeah.
And in some cases, when I actually click on the video and watch it, the video itself is fine. I mean, it's very responsible, very well done. But what I object to is the clickbait that was used to get you there,
Yeah.
Uh, and I understand that, you have to promote yourself to some degree. And obviously these people that have over 1 million followers, it's working for them. I don't have that many followers. But it was funny, and about consultants. There were two things that consultants told me during the time I was at WRAL that I ignored both of those things. First one, they said the public doesn't want to be educated. They just want to know if it's going to rain or not. That's not the feedback I got. People said they wanted to learn more about it. And the other thing is they said, never talk about what you're not sure of. And I got more positive feedback from the times that I looked into the camera and said, folks, I honestly don't know. I mean, here are the two most plausible options, but I'd be lying to you if I told you I was confident about this. And people appreciated the honesty.
Mhm.
So I sort of feel like, the conventional wisdom in the television industry is not always what works. At least I found that to be true in the Raleigh market.
Yeah, some of the feedback that I get down here a lot is that they tune in to watch the people specifically, not just to get the weather. I feel like they
Right?
feel that you're a presence in their house, a consistency that they can rely on. And so they trust you whenever something happens, something big comes up, a hurricane, snow, something like that. And I feel like that's important too, not just they can check their app for the weather, they can get a YouTube video, but the actual human
Yeah.
connection between the TV and them as well.
I think you're exactly right, and I didn't even think about that in the heat of the moment, but um, I think the people like I knew two people that were meteorologists in a major market got lured away to an even bigger market for more money, and within a year they were both out of jobs. And I always told our interns, I said, if you find a place where you like it and it likes you, think long and hard about leaving because the same formula that works here may not work there.
Yeah, the grass is not always greener.
No, it's
There
not.
you go.
By the way, did you hear that what the advantages are of having a grass cutting party?
I have not.
The mower, the merrier. I
See,
had to
those
sneak
ponds are one of the reasons that you were so loved in Raleigh.
I'm a sick puppy, no question about it.
So obviously, we were talking about the changes in broadcast meteorology.
Right.
And you had a change in your mentality too over the years as far as your view towards climate change. How
Yes.
did that change, and what's your current view towards that?
Uh, I got into I got into the very thing that I despise now, and that is just an unconditional loyalty to a certain political ideology with no willingness to bend, to listen, to reform, nothing. And so for years, I allowed an ideology to dictate my opinion about a science issue. And I woke up one day and realized that these two things are like oil and water. They don't mix, you know? And from a science standpoint, it became very difficult to make the argument that we weren't having an impact. I mean, we know the gases that make up our atmosphere, we know what their radiative properties are, and we know that without the natural amount of greenhouse gases, you and I wouldn't be talking right now, you know? So CO2 in of itself is not a bad thing, but what I tell people is if a small amount of something is the difference between the planet being inhabitable and not inhabitable, does it not make sense that doubling that could also have an equally significant impact, you know? However, I will tell you this, I am annoyed, and that's putting it mildly, by people that use scare tactics to get the point across. Um, there's a professor, retired professor from MIT in meteorology, Kerry Emanuel, and I love the way he puts it. He said, Greg, it all boils down to risk assessment. And he said, if we can figure out a way to minimize the risk without hurting people, why couldn't we all agree on that? And I like that approach because it's not we're all going to die tomorrow, and it's not we can do whatever the heck we want and God will save us. You know, that it's we're supposed to be good stewards of the planet. And if we know we're doing something that's potentially harmful, then why would we not want to get together and do the best we can to minimize, you know, that risk? I know that's not probably a sexy approach to it, but uh, but I think it's the most, you know, common sense one. And the analogy that I draw to this is with a tornado warning. Like even if you're under a warning, the chance of that tornado going right over your house is probably quite small. But if you don't prepare like it is, and it does, you're in big trouble. And so even if you think the risk of catastrophic climate change is small, if it does happen and we haven't done anything to prepare for it, we're in huge trouble.
Mhm.
So why not be prudent and plan for the worst, hope for the best, and go forward from there? And the fact that it's become such a political football really annoys me. And when I hear people in Congress saying it's a hoax, I'm sitting here thinking we need more science education with our political leaders on both sides of the aisle.
Mhm.
You know, power and ignorance is not a good mix. You know, it really isn't.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is well, it's not going to happen to me thing. It's years down the road. I don't have to worry about it type mentality.
Right. No, you're right. And that's to me, that's sort of a selfish view, you know, and
Mhm.
I know it's a cliche to say, well, we have to, you know, do this for our kids and our grandkids and so forth, but that's the way it is. I mean, you raise your kids so that they can be self-sufficient and make good decisions on their own. And, you know, even if I would never know about this, 50 years from now, I don't want my son on his deathbed saying, you know, my parents could have done something about this and they didn't. And now I'm suffering for it. You know, I really don't want that conversation to take place if I can avoid it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So now that you're on a TV, you probably have a lot more free time, but yet you still have a lot of presence online with your social media and your YouTube channel too. What was the reason behind wanting to start that, and what's your goal behind each video that you do for that?
You know that I didn't even know about Patreon until I was in Raleigh to see a hockey game that one of my sons was playing in. And all of a sudden over dinner, one of them said, you know, Dad, people still know your name. And he said, have you ever thought about Patreon? I had never even heard of it. And so a couple of months later, I, got the bare minimum equipment that I needed to give it a shot. And I, uh, I mean, the first thing I did was I tried to make it very affordable. I mean, it's $3 a month for the basic and 5 for the bonus. So hopefully not a budget buster. But the nice thing about it is that I can, if 3 minutes is up and I want to make one more point, I can. I don't have somebody standing next to the camera going like this.
Yeah.
And I go into a lot of stuff that just is not conventional. Like on my almanac page, I've got the solar declination angle and the azimuth of sunrise and sunset and how much daylight we have and how it changed from yesterday. Um, and then I'm a big proponent of ensembles. When I see people showing deterministic model forecasts 300 hours out, and they sit there and they say, well, that's not what I'm forecasting. I just wanted to share it with you. And I'm sitting there going, no, you shared it with me because you wanted to get eyeballs. Just be honest. Yeah.
Yep.
But I will show box and whisker plots and percentiles and that kind of stuff. And I don't assume the audience is, I'm going to be blunt. I don't assume they're stupid. I think people are, by and large, are smart. And even if they haven't been exposed to some of this stuff, that if you do your best to make it understandable, they can grasp it. And I think it's an insult to them to preach to the quote unquote lowest common denominator. I mean, that's very arrogant if you think about it. And I just sort of feel like, hey, if I phrase this the right way, there's no reason why the vast majority, if not all, of the people watching me can grasp that concept. So why not?
Yeah, what's that saying? Something about if you can't explain it clearly, you don't fully understand it yourself. I think something like that.
I like that.
So it makes sense. I mean, people want to learn, and if you can teach them in a clear and concise way, I feel like that's twice as good.
Yep, absolutely. And just because somebody has an 8th grade education doesn't mean they can't learn. I mean, it could have been a circumstance that they had no choice in, and that's the way their life evolved. But for gosh sake, I bet if given the opportunity, they would have gone beyond 8th grade. And by using things like TV and social media and all that, they still can. They still can learn.
Yeah, I think it all traces back to what you said a while ago about they want to know the science. They just need somebody to like actually sit there and try to teach them, not assume that they can't understand it, they can't grasp it, they want to learn it, and they can learn it too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when I think of some of the stuff that I learned when I was at, Penn State, some of the math and so forth, it really did depend on how well they did at explaining certain things. Like I'll never forget this. I was in dynamics one day and the professor came in and he said, now bear with me, folks. All I'm going to do today is fill up the board with equations. And he said, it's going to be torture, but he said, just bear with me. And he said, when you come in the next day, I'm going to show you how each one of those equations relates to a weather map. And that, I'll never forget that day when he said that, because now I can see an application. It isn't just numbers and equations. He's going to show me how that equation relates to real life. And that made all the difference to me. So, okay, I'll suffer through today if you can, finish it up the next time.
Yeah, I feel like that's very important because we had classes, I went to NC State, and we had classes where the entire class, you would start with one equation on the left side, fill out 3 whiteboards, and that was it. And it was like, what's the point in this? What am I learning? But it did slowly start to transform into, okay, that makes sense. That's what this means. That's why it's important.
Yes. And I'm sure you know Dr. Lackman then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gary and I guess he came here in about 2000 and we've been friends now for 25 years. And, the thing, well, lots of things I love about Gary, but, one of them is the fact that he is application minded. He knows the theory backwards and forwards, but he wants to apply it. And then on top of that, he's just a nice guy. It's like he's not one of these ivory tower professors with his head, quote unquote, up in the clouds. He's somebody that you can relate to on any level, no matter what you're going through in life. And I think we need more more professors like that, not just in meteorology, but in all fields. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I think that's about all the time I have for today. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Greg, for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And now, when did you graduate from state?
2020, right during COVID.
Okay.
So
Okay.
didn't have a graduation ceremony, just
Oh,
got the
no.
diploma. That was it.
Oh, my gosh. Well, congratulations on that diploma. I will.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of hard work.
Yes, exactly. And I wish you all the best in your career. You take care of yourself.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. See you later.
All right, see you.
Big thanks to meteorologist Greg Fishel for taking the time to speak to me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future videos just like this.